everyone, and welcome to another great episode of Speaking with Gravity. I'm your host, Joshua Williams.
Hey everybody, my name is Tina Williams. Welcome back to another episode 86, and
I'm the guest, Andre Goodman.
Special guest, yes sir, Mr. Goodman. So, thinking that it's definitely timely to have you on the episode today, but can you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I'm a former professional athlete, born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina, played at the University of South Carolina football.
Shout out, man.
Graduated in 2001, 10 years in the NFL. Retired, did player development at the University of South Carolina with student athletes, and fell in love with the one-on-one conversation. So start doing research over how I could better serve in underserved communities. So I went to United Way, and we started establishing a couple of programs that was designed around bringing resources in the right areas. And I found a passion in where I could serve, and mental health counseling just became that thing that just connected. So here I am. Licensed 3 months ago, and then I'm in private practice.
Licensed mental health?
Yeah, I'm a licensed professional counselor, so associate. So I got 2 years of supervision, but officially licensed. Appreciate it.
Well, from one professional to another one, congratulations on entering the field. What we all have in common here is our passion for mental health and just spreading awareness to our community. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely glad to have you. And so how we start off the segment normally, and it's actually something that we started with maybe last season, I think. We want to know what the people want to know, and the people tell us what they want to know.
Gotcha.
And so this episode, the question that was on the floor was, what was your most intrusive thoughts? So the people are really technical because they know, I guess they know what an intrusive thought is. But I think it's a great topic to kind of build out. But we do want to start with that. If any of you would be comfortable with speaking to that, what was your most recent intrusive thought?
Oh yeah, you want to go with that one. So yeah, absolutely. Mine's are usually pretty consistent. Like mine is centered around, is my perspective of the world delusional? Because like I have a very deep belief that God actually exists. And if he exists, then my spirit is actually connected to him through his son. And if that's the case, the voices that I hear are driving me to be here, because my social anxiety is so bad I would never get on camera to promote myself. But the ideal of him saying, hey, I gifted you with this, how about you use it? Because right now you're wasting it. And it's like, well, I don't feel worthy. And he's like, yeah, you're never going to be worthy, but the mercy and the grace makes you worthy, so use it. And in feeling that, I feel like I'm walking in my purpose. Right. So it's going to be hard-pressed to convince me that if I'm not driven by that, if I'm not living by that, and you're asking me to accept the limitations that the world places on me, that sounds more delusional to me. So my intrusive thought is often, am I really delusional? Because I can't buy into this reality. I can accept it, I just don't buy into it because it feels chaotic to me. So I've been diagnosed with a couple disorders myself. So like I actually have to question these things in terms of logically, am I processing things properly? So those intrusive thoughts attack me often. So.
And you know, the people who are asking this question, they may know what an intrusive thought is, but an intrusive thought, do y'all have like a definition maybe?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to share an example of how I experience intrusive thoughts. But I want to just open the floor up too, as for what intrusive thoughts are as well. But in my experience, like one, I had to, like you said, understand what an intrusive thought was, because for the longest, I was associating intrusive thoughts with impulsive thoughts. And it wasn't until I did my research that I understood the difference between the two. So impulsive thoughts they cause little to no distress. They are usually under control. You're able to control them. They usually do not cause shame, guilt, or anxiety, and they can sometimes be associated with ADHD. So an example of an impulsive thought is, knock that cup off the table right now. Like, just knock it off the table. Another example of an impulsive thought is, just cut your hair. Like, cut it, get a change. Now, what we're talking about today are intrusive thoughts, and those are mostly involuntary and unwanted. They can cause guilt or shame. Sometimes they can be severe in nature. People do not want to act on them, and they are usually out of our control. And so an example of this is, there's multiple examples that we can explore later, but I can just use my own personal example is sometimes I have the intrusive thoughts of like, this feeling overwhelmed constantly. Like, for example, Wednesday I had a big presentation at my job, and I'm the youngest in my department, and I'm also the newest in my department. So I'm like, my supervisor selected me for this presentation out of all of the other counselors in my department, and I'm just constantly thinking for the past 2 weeks, like, am I good enough? Why did they choose me? Like, am I going to completely fumble this presentation? So I constantly had those intrusive thoughts that were outside of my control. And so, yeah, that's an example of my intrusive thoughts. And I can definitely relate to your example as well.
Yeah. I appreciate the definition, too, and y'all being willing to share. And I feel as though intrusive thoughts, a lot of times, they can harm us more when we already have like our emotions attached to them, and that's probably really why they come up, is because we get it, there's an emotional reaction from the thought. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah, and I mean, mine are usually tied to my devilish side, and often like bad memories. So it's always like, a dude cut me off on the road. I probably should have drove him off the road for cutting me off. Like, it's stuff that you shouldn't be thinking about. Or like, I'm a married man, and it's like, man, remember Lisa in high school? Man, I wish I'd have got to know her better. It's like, dude, you married, swipe that thing away. Right. So it's like those thoughts that always interrupt, and bad memories. Like, man, why did you let Gronkowski score on you? Like, do you really suck that bad? And you have to talk yourself out of that stuff. I think the more you do the work, though, I think, and you start to align your real beliefs with who you are as a person, when those thoughts come, if they don't align with your beliefs, it's easy just to swipe them and get rid of them. It's like anything else. Like any unhealthy relationship, you're always supposed to not give it attention. You make it irrelevant, make it have no effect on you, because at the end of the day, it's not serving you. It's not promoting any health, promoting wellness. So it's always easier just to swipe it.
And Mr. Andre, that's a good, what you just said is a good pathway into our QD of the hour. So every episode, we talk about a QD or a statistic or our version of fun facts that kind of just relates to the topic. So our topic today is, Josh, do you want to introduce that?
Oh, yeah. So so the topic is decrease intrusive thoughts.
Okay.
So we've been talking about what an intrusive thought is, got some examples of intrusive thought. So thinking about how to decrease those intrusive thoughts. Thanks for bringing us into that. I was just saying to Hannah, y'all, offline, I was like, listen, Hannah, you always bring us back to where we need to be. I love it. But yeah, please.
Well, it was just perfect like timing, because Mr. Andre was talking about his of why he has experienced intrusive thoughts. So our QD of the hour states, in the 1980s, psychologist Daniel Weiner conducted a series of experiments that lasted 5 minutes each. Participants were instructed not to think about a white bear and to ring a bell if they found themselves doing so. Interestingly, the more they tried to avoid thinking about the white bear, the more frequently they had to ring the bell. This demonstrated that the effort to suppress a thought often makes it more prominent in one's mind. And this comes from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. So this is pretty interesting, because I do feel like our brain forces us, if it's something that we're not supposed to think about, our brain is going to constantly repeat that one topic or that one thought in our heads, similar to like what you were explaining. And that's the perfect example of intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, you putting that effort against it, so it's working. What you're working against starts working against you, right?
Yeah, I think the more focus you give it, the more power it has, and the more you fight against it, it just becomes more intense. So learning how to just release it, it's not easy, but it's the best way to go about it. And again, knowing who you are and what aligns with you makes it easy to
First
do that.
step,
So.
yeah. That self-awareness, knowing who, knowing yourself.
So I want to explore that a little bit. From your experience, like how are, this is just an open question, but how does self-awareness relate to intrusive thoughts?
Okay, so self-awareness is everything to me. And I'll just give you just a little bit of background, just in terms of, like, we're talking about mental health in the Black community, how it affects Black men in particular, and we often associate the Black male plight with what we call the struggle, which I always define as like the generational cycle of reducing our options to early death or prison, because systemic oppression often makes us feel like our opportunities are restricted, and whether that's our perception or just the reality that we've accepted, either way, the limited resources to properly provide for your family will make you feel less than a man. And that feeling less than often brings about enough shame that a man doesn't feel comfortable showing his face to his family. So even when he's present, he feels like a absentee father. And he can't face himself, but he can't run away from himself. So instead, he engages in unhealthy behavior, whether it's unhealthy sexual behavior or dabbling in different substances. So even me coming from that type of environment, and even as you begin to thrive and start to find comfort in your position in the world will eventually remind you of what your true position is through unjust treatment based on skin tone alone. And that obvious discrimination from our perspective it almost demands a combative spirit, which then makes us the angry Black man. Because now we're confronting every obstacle and everything that restricts us. And in doing so, we often find ourselves back in that same cycle because it's destructive behavior. So personally, like as a counselor, I've been trained not to give advice. So often just lean on my own personal experience as an alternative. Being that that's the environment I grew up in, I knew that I had to find a different route. So it felt easier to, instead of fighting against the world, to just look internal. Like, so I give more attention to what's going on inside, and trying to become a better version of myself is healthier than fighting against the world. And when you do that, you learn so much about yourself on your own personal journey. The more you learn about yourself, the more self-aware you become. Personally, I don't feel the need to be validated by the world at all. Right. I have zero concern with trying to find any tangible proof that says I am the man that I already know I am. And you're going to be hard-pressed to convince me otherwise because of the work that I've done. Like,
because of the work you've done.
And I mean, at the end of the day, like if you are
the work you've done on yourself, too,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah. But if you're attracting the life that you want, you're actually, and then when you do that, you feel deserving of that. You don't feel the need to compare that life to the next man, Black man or otherwise, and you are grateful for the life that you've been given, and you're less judgmental about the lack of resources. So. It's just a different alternative. It's just the work. It's the internal work. So.
I definitely liked how you explained that. I heard some factors about how our environment impacts intrusive thoughts, how race can impact intrusive thoughts, and then ultimately how your purpose can, sometimes impact or add to some of those intrusive thoughts and add some pressure. I saw this tweet on Twitter, or X, they call it now, the other day, and the lady said, the more I heal, the less ambitious I become. And it's not just saying that the more I heal, I just want to be a bum and not do anything. But the more I heal, I'm not worried about that external validation. I'm not worried about the accolades and the salary that I thought I wanted before. And that just resonated within me, because it's like, when I experience intrusive thoughts, where is that coming from? Right. Is it coming from external validation, or is it coming from internal? So I really like how you highlighted, like, the more self-awareness we do, it helps those intrusive thoughts.
Absolutely.
It does. Yeah, and I totally agree, Hannah. I feel like on my healing journey, the more I've healed, for one, the more I've been able to recognize and it might be to your point as well, Andre, the more I've been able to recognize things in other people that I'm like, okay, I can't look down on, being not judgmental, right? Because I know what I've gone through, and I know the work that I had to put in. I know that person is going to have to put in some work. And I want to encourage everybody as well to be willing to put in that work, because it's rewarding at the end of the day. I know, our listeners, I know they can hear it from you, just how rewarding that it is. But it is work at the end of the day. It's I tell people sometimes, you may have to, go somewhere and just get some time by yourself, right? You may have to go somewhere and just sit, just blocking everything out so you can really look internally and continue to take responsibility for every part of your life. If somebody, I was telling somebody the other day, if somebody did me wrong, sure, I can acknowledge that they did me wrong, but I'm still gonna be looking at what I did in the situation, right? Because it just continue. It takes the power away from that person.
Absolutely.
And when we think about intrusive thoughts, the same type of thinking takes the power away from that intrusive thought, right? Let me separate myself from this and let me get back internal and let me continue to learn about myself. Right?
And you spoke about the work, and again, this is just personal experience. As hard as fighting against the world is, it's tougher to fight against yourself, because you have no one else to blame. I mean, all the uncontrollable variables in the world, or at the end of the day, you have no control over them, but you do have control over what's going on inside of you, and you have no one to blame but yourself. And people don't want to deal with that. That's very scary, because then you're recognizing your own weaknesses, and sometimes you don't want to acknowledge them.
I was talking to someone a couple years ago, and it was a black male, and they were saying like they come from a rough childhood, from poverty, where they didn't have money. Their mom, could barely pay the bills, a single parent household, and their validation was getting rich. That made them feel better. That made them feel like a man, because they had this external validation. They had a nice car. They had nice homes. However, once they got rich, they weren't happy. They still weren't okay with themselves. So it's like, what is that missing piece? And like you spoke to, it's internal. We can seek all of the external validation all day, but it's hardest to do the internal work. Mr. Andre, I heard you speak about your experience in the NFL and like working with athletes in different sports. So can you explore how intrusive thoughts can relate to like athletes and in sports?
Yeah, for sure. So it's all kind of relative at the end of the day, because you're still, when you talk about providing as a father, producing for the household is no different when it comes to performance. You're constantly being evaluated. You're under pressure to perform, produce, provide. There's the constant fear of failure that can feel crippling at times, and those intrusive thoughts become overwhelming if you feed into them, and they become noise. So I think I mentioned earlier that I experienced dysfunctional social anxiety. So just to participate in front of the large crowd, I had to learn to ignore the noise, because if I gave it attention, it destabilizes me. I don't even have a chance. And then in doing that, you also, I have to neglect the actual fanfare that comes with it. Have to neglect the critics and the comments. And then you learn that, like we said, the more attention that you give those thoughts, the more power they have over you. Like, it's absolutely imperative that you be informed. But my mind is kind of allergic to BS. So when the information feels toxic, I don't have a tolerance for it. Okay. So learning to turn that off because it does not serve me came a little easier through the social anxiety that I experienced, because I had already shut the world off, and I dwell in my dreams. And in doing that, my dream materialized. So the less energy you give to what doesn't serve you, the more energy you give yourself. It's just so much healthier. It's harder, but it's healthier.
And it goes back to that example of the QD earlier. Like, the more time they spent not trying to think about the white bear, something they weren't supposed to be thinking about, the more time they actually spent thinking about it. Now, imagine if, and this relates to something we referenced in the last episode, imagine if we harvested that energy into something like self-improvement, or, our family, our harvesting that energy into our personal goals, like how fulfilling that would be. And so I'm glad that you made that connection between sports and intrusive thoughts. And I don't want to like get off topic too much, but I heard you say you had to learn how to neglect the critics and the comments. My question is, and I know that you may have played sports like a couple years ago and then kind of transitioned to working with athletes, but when you mentioned neglecting critics and comments, was that more so in person, or was it virtually and online? Was it on campus? Like, how did you have to?
I think as an athlete, it was just I didn't read the paper, and now I'm currently like I don't have a social media presence. Like I'm learning how to do that because now I'm engaged in this new venture and it's part of the marketing process. But I don't pay attention to what doesn't add value or quality to my life, and that's not saying that if you do, there's something wrong. I just don't do it because it's part of my process, and my process is to be efficient in who I am. And if what is happening out there does not serve that, then at the end of the day, it's just polluting my thought process. And now I'm not thinking logically. I'm thinking with a mental cog that has no purpose. And like you get stuck in that, which I did. That's also what drove me to the profession, because I got stuck in it. Like when I retired, I got lost. I didn't know what my identity was going to be. And I'm forced to listen to everything else, because it's like I have to take in information just to evaluate my new place in the world. And in doing that, I was like, oh my God, you're not prepared to deal with reality, bro, because this is not what you do. I'm so to myself that when I can't be, and that's why I talked about being engaged with reality, it feels so chaotic to me. It's like, oh my God, this feels toxic, because everything means I'm trying to take from you, you trying to take from me, and it's like I'm not a self-serving individual. Like I'm not self-preserving, and it's natural to be, but my nature is to feel better by giving to others. So I can't compete against what the world is doing, because we're all competing against each other.
Right.
And if you're competing against me and nobody's serving me, now I have to serve myself. And that means being to myself. And being to myself is not productive when you're trying to advance in the world. So now you really are fighting against yourself. And it took me it's taken me a while to get here to be in front of this camera, because for a while I was in isolation, man. I'm in true isolation, because everything felt paralyzing to me. Every time I walked out my door, I was like, if this is the rat race that I got to play, oh my God, I have no place in the world. And that is a very depressing thought when you are equipped with, I had more than enough resources to feel good. And you were talking about the gentleman earlier that came from nothing and built up a lifestyle that he was satisfied with and still wasn't happy. I've never been driven by money. Obviously, the dream is to be able to provide, but when that doesn't satisfy you, and everybody's chasing what you already have, like, where do you turn to?
Right.
So,
and so what did you turn to, kind of?
So I turned to serving others. So like I ended up doing the USC thing with the student athletes, and then I went United Way, and we were working in an underserved community, and I got to be around kids that less than, and the great thing is it reconnected me to my roots, because now I'm back in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and it reminded me of the energy that I had as an 8-year-old, as a 13-year-old, and why I was chasing. And then what came from it was, oh man, it really has nothing to do with destination. That climb, the energy to be better, the climb, the chase is what I feed off of. So once I realized that, okay, you may have hit rock bottom mentally because you're stuck, but now you're forced to get that energy back, because now I want to climb again. Yeah. And now I'm here in front of you guys. That's what's driving me. And every time I talk to someone that has my shared experience, or those that are dealing with mental health issues, and I want to say this because I'll forget it. Acknowledging mental health, and I'm very passionate about this topic because it's from my own personal experience. And Black community, listen up as well. Black men, listen up as well. I can confirm from my own personal experience, mental health struggles are real. They're not an excuse. They're not a cop-out. And acknowledging them does not make you weak. It actually just makes you honest.
Yes.
And when you're honest with yourself, you're willing to deal with yourself. And when you're willing to deal with yourself, you do the work. And I did the work. And again, this is not a brag, because I'm not that person. But it's the only thing that allowed me to be here. because otherwise I would still be stuck in isolation.
And I'm so glad that you highlighted that, because I feel like in the Black community, there's that disconnect there. There's that disconnect of getting help and getting resources for your mental health, because a lot of people don't even acknowledge their mental health struggles. Like, it's easy to be in the profession and say, okay, I can diagnose this person with that, but what about myself? Like, until I started doing the work on myself and seeing how I may have had, some mental health challenges, or the people around me have had some mental health challenges, and how that has impacted me, then it's so difficult to serve others. It's so difficult to help others in an honest way. In an honest way. You can do it, but is it in an honest way? So I wanted to explore, you talking about, like, your purpose is to serve others. How do you do that now? How do you use the work you've done on yourself to serve others, whether it's athletes or, how do you help others confront their challenges?
So I did write a book, and I might as well plug it, because if I don't, my wife is going to be upset because I don't do enough.
Shout out to her.
It's called Maybe I'm Ill, The Shadow in the Empty Chair. And it wasn't just because I do enjoy writing, but narrative therapy is how I process my own emotions. So the book forced me to put my truth on trial and look for evidence of if I was actually being honest with myself. And once I was able to validate my own truth and my own perspective, I knew I had no issue in sharing my story. That in itself allows me to help others. So especially in the athletic arena, hyper-masculinity is rampant, because feeling that sense of invincibility is kind of our superpower. And I think men feel the same, because that sense of feeling superior to the next man, having the influence, having the power, being able to say that from a social standpoint, my achievements make me better than you. We feed off of that. And again, there's not a problem with that until it gets to the extreme and becomes dysfunctional. So my ideal of helping others is through emotional intelligence, which men don't like to really tap into. And I was somewhat fortunate in this area, because I was raised by a single mother and two older sisters, and I prioritized their well-being to the point where I was so alert to their feelings, their happiness, and the things that brought them pain. And I wanted to understand how the things that mattered to them affected them. And in doing that, you start to empathize with their experience a bit. And through that empathy, you learn how to put yourself to the side and put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I didn't even know I was doing it at the time. So now as a male, even though I do have that same energy to be superior, there's also a emotional balance there, because I became so hypersensitive to their pain, my sister's pain, my mother's tears, that I started to mimic them. And because I'm so recluse, I would sit still and just feel the sensation. And it helped me understand what my body was telling me. And that combination of understanding your emotions with that same sense of, oh yeah, I want to be the greatest version of myself without having to stand on top of somebody else, is what allows me to help others, especially men who have are less prone to tap into that side of themselves. So it's my way of encouraging men to tap in a bit.
Wow, you said a lot, and you just said a lot, and I want to highlight how it all started with self-awareness, but you taught yourself emotional intelligence. Right. And I know that's something that we promote here on Speaking with Gravity, is learning, emotional intelligence, because that way you're able to help others, you're able to serve others. But you can even rub off on your own community, and I'm sure you did, like, with your mom and with your sisters, of just knowing your own emotional intelligence and helping them to navigate theirs, helping them navigate, what are you feeling right now? I see you in pain, but what exactly are you feeling? And, how did this experience bring this about? So I definitely appreciate that you're vulnerable here. Like, this is a vulnerable space to just admit you have to work on that emotional intelligence. And I can admit, from a Black woman, like, sometimes we don't want to do that. Right. Sometimes we want to put our emotions into work. Sometimes we want to put that into our different hairstyles. But, like, how can we turn that pain or that trauma into emotional intelligence so that we can ultimately just heal?
Right.
Beautiful, man. Y'all, listen, man. Y'all been going in. I was thinking about something. You know, we have these intrusive thoughts. Some of us have these intrusive thoughts. Thinking about myself. And there's a scripture that comes to mind. Y'all know I be thinking about scriptures all the time. Resist the devil, he flee from you. Draw nigh to God, he draw nigh to you. So what that makes me think about is, like you mentioned, when we're resisting those thoughts by getting back to who we are. And then I think about the second part, which is drawing nigh unto God. What are we putting in there then? Like, as we're resisting these thoughts, this is not who I am. What then do we put in there? I know one thing we always talk about is gratitude, right? To kind of continue to build ourselves up so that those thoughts aren't all that's in there. You know what I'm saying? But what are some other things? Are there other things that you put in there from your toolbox?
Yeah, and I'll say they're very intuitive though, because like when I feel the emotion, when I feel the sensation, my body tells me what I need, and sometimes I need golf. Sometimes I need to be grounded and be in nature and be solo. Like I play 95% of the time I play golf, I'm by myself. And I really suck, but I enjoy being out there because I'm in nature. It's quiet.
It's a grounding experience.
Oh my God, yeah, because like my feet, like I'm walking and I'm feeling the ground, but I'm watching the trees blow. I'm listening to the birds chirp. I'm smelling what the air is. And it's just me in nature. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes for me it's yoga. It's feeling relaxed. There's a sense of stability that actually roots you into the ground too when you're doing all those multiple poses. And then at the end of that tiresome session, I want to mispronounce it, this is a thing called savasana that it allows you just to relax your body, and your body absolutely just melts into the floor. So when you start feeling some of those things, it kind of tells you, okay, bro, where are you vulnerable at now? What improvements do you need? And sometimes it's really just intimate connection. Like I just need to feel connected because the world is so busy. People don't stop to actually get to know one another. Right. And I only feed off of personal progress and intimate connection. So if I'm not working on myself personally, trying to connect intimately, and it could be the same connection. Like my wife gets 95% of my time, and I talk about Black males a lot because it's how I simplify my process. But I also justify it by saying that I know I'm my wife's biggest stressor. So by working on myself, I'm actually emphasizing her wellness. But that connection that matters so much. Also, like when you connect with somebody 20 years later and it's like you have the same energy, it's because that connection 20 years ago was genuine. And that's rare. So that stuff feeds me.
This is just a reference. Y'all gotta check out our last episode talking about chemistry and connection. But you said a lot just now. And I'm just so intrigued about how you've been able to turn your purpose and turn your experiences into a larger purpose, into helping other individuals that have mental health challenges and able to serve other people. So, and Josh, I would just want to highlight that was a great scripture. That was a great reference, and also a great question as well.
Appreciate it. I mean, it's one that. So I tell you what's kind of grounding for me. One thing is scripture, just because that's kind of what I've been brought up in, and something that I would often go to. I feel like it's an answer in there for just about everything. And sometimes I'll mess around. I'll Google this and I'll Google something I'm thinking about, and there may be a scripture for it. So. So that's one thing that I use to ground myself, as well as, like you mentioned, kind of just walking. I also kind of just be vulnerable with myself and allow myself to kind of admit things about myself that I'm like, oh man, this might be. It feels like a weakness, right? It feels like, and I'm doing it to myself. But what I get, I'm encouraged because when I do that in my private sphere, it makes me, when I get out in front of people, it makes me more authentic. You know what I'm saying? I don't feel like I'm hiding anything because I've faced everything in the dark. You know what I'm saying? So when I'm in the light, it's like, listen, cool. Like I can be more confident, with who I am, be more confident carrying whatever I have to carry, So that's a beautiful thing in itself, is is just being able to when you can be truthful with yourself,
Right.
About whatever, and then like you mentioned, go to work on it. And sometimes it's not so much work. I've experienced sometimes it's not so much work. It's just letting it go, right? Whether you gotta cry and let it go, come to these realizations or whatever, just getting it out there and just letting it be what it is. A lot of times we'll try to manipulate it, try to control it, try to define it. You know, it's value in defining it, but I've witnessed like trying to over define things and ended up kind of trying to make it what I wanted it to be. No, sometimes it's just that. And when you can just go through and carry it in private, then you can carry it when you get out there, in that public and professional.
I love that, man. And only because it brought up a thought for me, like you guys you have no way of knowing this, but right now I'm facing my fear just by being here. Like, so when I say like I had to learn how to write my truth on paper to myself and read it and say, oh my God, that's hard to read, because now I have to feel it.
Process,
and then in doing that, it's like, bro, okay, that's strong. Like if you share that and anybody find that out, bro, that's not ooh. And my fear was, I'm gonna put it on Facebook. I'm not even a social media guy, so I'm gonna put it on Facebook to see what happens. Because if I feel it, maybe somebody else is experiencing it. And that it snowballed into this. Now I'm licensed as a therapist because it's like, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. It's okay that I have those flaws. It's okay that I'm vulnerable in certain areas. It's okay because the whole me is what makes me strong. So ignoring any part of me is not a flex. It's more so of, hey man, like I feel good in acknowledging everything that I am and the flaws that come with me, man. And there's a lot of people that can accept it. But the great thing about it is that those that don't are actually doing the work for me, because now I don't have to pretend to get to know people that have no interest in my wellness. So it makes it easy.
Go ahead, Josh.
No, I was just saying, yes, sir. Yes.
Well, Josh, I heard you talk about letting go of those intrusive thoughts and what can we do to replace or substitute, when we let go. And then Mr. Andre, I heard you talk about when you do let go of those intrusive thoughts, just accepting it. And so I did some background research, and I just want to share with you all a technique of what to do with your intrusive thoughts. And this comes from acceptance and commitment therapy. So this activity is called Leaves on a Stream. So first, visualize your mind as a running river or stream. Imagine your thoughts are falling leaves, so leaves within that river. Imagine that one of the leaves falls into the water. Label that leaf as the intrusive thought that you're currently experiencing and watch as the river slowly carries it away. Repeat that process for any thoughts you're experiencing, both the intrusive thought itself, the judgments you have about that thought, and any other thoughts that occur to you in that moment. And just visualize the leaves slowly floating away.
That's dope.
So I just want to share this technique because this is new to me. Like I literally just researched this. And this is just a way that, if you're at home watching this episode and you're experiencing some intrusive thoughts, whether it comes from your family, your childhood, trying to fulfill your purpose in life, wherever those intrusive thoughts come from, what can you do to process and to deal with those? And Mr. Andre, I heard you reference something earlier. You said, I dwell in my dreams.
Oh, yeah.
Explain that to me a little bit more.
I'm going to try to do it through the short story I wrote when I agreed to do this podcast. It was kind of relative to the topic itself in terms of like the triggers for my intrusive thoughts are definitely unprocessed trauma and also toxic stress that comes from it. So because narrative therapy is my thing, I figure if I don't read it out here, I'll probably tear it up in the car and nobody ever hears it. So
let's hear it.
So it's entitled The Shadow Beneath the Tree. So the idea for me is the book that I wrote, the first one, it was the first part of a trilogy. The second one will probably be an audio book if I actually give it energy. I keep telling myself I will. So this was the first prelude to the second part, and I was just testing it out. Okay. My son said it wasn't horrible, so let me see how you guys think about it. Maybe I'm ill. At the very least, there's a case to be made for my mental dysfunction to illogically explain my unique perspective. As a young black kid in the City Heights projects, I often stare out my bedroom window to steal a glimpse of the future that awaits me. It's the birthplace of my delusion. It's rooted underneath the tree out front. The absentee fathers are dodging their domestic duties as they're fraternizing with the heads of the households who are indulging in the happy hour. It's easy to discern the hardworking gentlemen from those down on their luck. Hustlers find a lot of business beneath the tree, and when their dealings are done, the homeless convert the space into their nightly shelter. As I scan for models of behavior to mimic, the disorderly conduct taints my outlook on life since figures of greatness are merely a mirage. My trauma runs deep. I sleepwalk with the onslaught of gunfire aimed in my direction. Repressed memories lack any warning, so I'm compelled to operate in a panic mode, although I'm apathetic in nature, so I appear calm to most people. I never stray too far from home. It reduces the odds of dangerous encounters that present themselves throughout the neighborhood. With no telephone of our own and no reliable transportation, I'm essentially disconnected from the world and isolated in my illusions. I've never been properly introduced to reality. In my favorite fantasy, I'm gifted with the supernatural ability to soar beyond my current circumstances. Last night, there was another frantic knock at the back door. As I readied myself for the source of the pounding, I revisited previous incidents. Maybe there's another fight that broke out downstairs. The house parties tend to get rowdy when the happy hour extends into the late evening. However, the music has already died down, so perhaps someone is attempting to break in again. And once again, I'll discover the perpetrator in the hallway during my midnight bathroom break. My cousin still hasn't forgiven me for neglecting my bladder that night. Coincidentally, that discarded mattress accelerated my backwards flipping abilities. But no, just as I expected, the memory provokes another paralyzing nightmare. It's the third one this week. I haven't had a good night's sleep since birth. As the morning rises, I'm greeted with my mother's nonchalant explanation that the devil continues to ride my back in the middle of the night during my lucid dreams. Because I've developed a healthy habit of never asking her to elaborate, I feign disinterest to avoid increasing the burden that she bears. But what does the devil want with me, and why is he hijacking my sleep? As my demonic deliberations clamor for my attention, I'm veering in and out of present tense. I'm definitely not well. I'm desperate for guidance, but there's nowhere to turn. The important male figures in my life have their own struggles. So I focus my energy on becoming the role model that I needed in that moment. But my neurotic personality demands perfection. So maybe I'm ill. So I have to dwell in my dreams. I don't have a choice. Reality does not work for me. So that started at an early age. And obviously, it's still pretty raw. But that habit also helped my dreams materialize. It helped me process pain. And through the real raw process, I can relate to the human condition. And the best part about that is no one is exempt from the human condition. Black, white, male, female, no one is exempt. And now I understand the human experience because I've allowed myself to understand the human experience. Why wouldn't I share that?
I really appreciate and just thank you for sharing that. It's entitled "The Shadow Beneath the Tree."
Yeah, correct.
I really just wanted to listen, and I really enjoyed and appreciate that you even chose to share that here on Speaking with Gravity for our listeners. And I know that our listeners appreciate that. The Shadow Beneath the Tree, where does that title come from?
So the concept of the shadow is a theory by Gestalt. It's a Gestalt theory. And the ideal of it is it's that dark part of us that we do not want to acknowledge because it's our simple nature, it's our animalistic instinct, it's our sexual desire, it's our need to be aggressive. And that really is, when you talk about intrusive thoughts, it's like, oh my God, I wish I can indulge in the selfish behaviors that feed me or feed that shadow. And acknowledging that in isolation becomes dangerous. So facing that shadow was the key to me saying it's okay that that part of me exists. I'm not even trying to get rid of that part of me. I'm trying to understand that part of me to the point where knowing it's a part of me and dealing with it allows me to be whole. The tree itself is a concept of individualization by Carl Jung. who has all these archetypes in terms of our personality, our persona, our ego. I think the shadow is also part of that as well. So the idea of the worst parts of me is like, those are my role models. That part of me that I hate, my role models are right under that tree. That tree is where all the action in the neighborhood takes place, and it's right outside my window. So as I'm watching my future take place, I have to live in my dream, which means I'm forced to go inside of me and deal with all those archetypes as a part of that tree concept that Carl Jung talks about. So,
and I want to highlight how that can simultaneously happen at the same time. You can chase your dreams while also facing that shadow.
Absolutely.
You know, it doesn't have to be this dark period of your life where you're in isolation and, you know, you don't want to talk to your wife. You don't want to entertain your kids. You don't want to keep doing your responsibilities as a man. Life still happens, right, and you still have to process those things inside.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate you for sharing that with us. I learned a lot today just from this topic of talking about intrusive thoughts. What about you, Josh?
Man, I learned a lot. Shoot, I'm facing shadows right now. I mean, my wife be like, man, what? You just seem like you ain't worried about nothing. Man, I got stuff going on just like anybody else.
Yeah,
you know,
Josh, I'm gonna encourage you not to suffer in silence, man. You got to talk up, bro.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is like a lot of those, like I've gone like to myself, I've done that introspection, and so then I'm more, once I've done that, like I'm more comfortable. You know what I'm saying? Like it like stuff won't faze me.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? So she'll be like, might be like, man, that, you know, you just might think that something would bother me, but it's like I've been practicing letting things go, you know, for a while now. Not saying I'm where I need to be. I might need to talk to somebody more, right? But I will say that I'm grateful for where I've gotten on my journey, though. And a lot of it started with just, you know, being truthful, just being honest, and being vulnerable with myself and taking it to the Lord, of course, and getting that guidance and direction.
Absolutely.
And having that sense of community and support around you. That's a reoccurring thing we talk about on Speaking with Gravity, is that, and you even just highlighted it, Mr. Andre, of not dwelling in those thoughts and those feelings about yourself, having that community and those resources around you. And Speaking with Gravity can be that community for you. You know, if you find comfort in listening to our topics, share some topics you want us to explore. You know, if you're interested in coming on the show as a host, please reach out to us, because we're just here to advocate and to spread awareness for our Black community, and our community in general, one step at a time, one episode at a time.
I love it. That's a beautiful wrap up. Hannah, we thank you,
Yes.
Andre, for
I appreciate
for
the
being,
invitation.
for being with us. What
Good.
can we find? Like, can we find you?
Yeah,
anywhere?
so my website is the source of everything. It's agoodmanconsults.com. It has my book on it. It has my private practice on it. It has my speaking engagements on it, and I often blog and stuff like this pops up on it. I think there's some social media handles at the bottom that I'm learning to engage in. So yeah, my website is where everything is.
Agoodmanconsults.com.
agoodmanconsults.com. It's a play on my name, Andre Goodman, my first initial and my last name.
Go.
A Goodman.
So, Mr. Andre, before we wrap up today, are there any thoughts that you want to share with us? Anything you want to share with the people? Just final thoughts before we conclude.
Yeah, and I'll be brief. I just encourage all those who know they're having some of those struggles to at least acknowledge them and don't find shame in knowing that they exist. Because there's power in doing the work, and I'm saying that because I've done it. So I encourage you all to do the same.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for taking time out to join us today.
Not a
I
problem.
thoroughly enjoyed today's episode.
Most definitely. And thank you all. And thank you all for joining us
Yes.
as well. It's been another great episode of Speaking with Gravity. We're looking forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you once again to our guest. And yeah, please continue to do the work, everybody. If you didn't take nothing else from this episode, man, go do the work. It might be a little scary sometimes. It might be challenging, but it will be rewarding at the end of the day. So continue to do that and continue to speak with gravity.
Yes. Take care, y'all.